Well, welcome to our Monday Bible study for those in person and those at home. We're glad you're here. Today, if things work out the way I hope, we will finish 1 Samuel. Now, 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel is kind of arbitrary. In the original Hebrew, it's just one long work. It wasn't until it was translated into the Greek Septuagint that they broke the book apart, and they broke it in the middle because the death of Saul is kind of a good transition. And then when it was translated into Latin by the early church, they kept in the Christian tradition the break of the two books. But it's one work, and as we read it today, and we'll end with the death of Samuel, it is in many ways a tragic end, but a bright beginning. So far in our text, we've been looking at how David's rise has caused Saul just to become unnerved to the point that he's constantly chasing after David. We read several stories last week of David doing some narrow escapes, but also preserving Saul's life. We also read where David is restrained on several of occasions from using excessive violence to get what he needs or what he wants. And we ended last week with two stories. One of those stories was with Abigail becoming the second wife of David. When we read that text, we see that Saul has taken away Micah from David and given her to somebody else. So David has two wives, and Saul is constantly after him, and it's gotten to the point where David just cannot rest. So we get to chapter 28, and David is looking for a way to, or chapter 27, I'm sorry. David is looking for a way to get away. David said in his heart, "I shall now perish one day by the hand of Saul. There is nothing better for me than to escape to the land of the Philistines. Then Saul will despair of seeking me any longer within the borders of Israel, and I shall escape out of his hand." So David's recourse is, if I can just go out of his reach, then he'll have to give up looking for me and be content that I'm beyond his reach. And over, David has said to Saul, "There's nothing I've done to you, nor nothing I want to do to harm you. I've had the opportunity to kill you, and I've not done it." So he goes to the land of the Philistines. So David set out and went over, he and the 600 men who were with him, to King Ashan, son of Makach of Gath. And David stayed with Ashan at Gath, and he and his troops, every man with his household, and David with his two wives, and Aniam of Jezreel and Abigail of Carmel, Nabal's widow. Now, both of these women come from wealth, so he does have wealth with him now. He's got 600 men. And when Saul was told that David had fled to Gath, he no longer sought for him. Well, let's just imagine David, who is everybody's favorite. Not only is he everybody's favorite, but the underdog's favorite. All the people that have gone to him have been people that have rejected Saul in one form or fashion. And just like David is the eighth son of a poor people, many of the people that have run after David are too the marginalized, the ones that don't feel as though the kingship has their best interests at heart. But all of a sudden he goes and now is living amongst the people he has fought against, and that they are the main enemy of Israel. So we would think his reputation would go what? Would go down. So let's see what happens. Then David said to Ashan, "If I have found favor in your sight, let a place be given to me in one of the country towns, so that I may live there. For why would your servant lie in the royal city with you?" So that day Asher gave him Ziklag. Therefore Ziklag has belonged to the kings of Judah to this day. And the length of time that David lived in the country of the Philistines was 1 year and 4 months. So the king gives him this territory for him essentially to rule over. what we'll see is David becomes essentially a warlord. He's got his little fiefdom and the territories around him he's in charge of, and he goes, and what we'll see is he goes and raids them. It's interesting what he does and then what he says he's doing. Because the question becomes, is he aligned really with the king of Gath, or is he still aligned with Israel? So he goes, he's got this territory that he's essentially a small little kingdom of his. His men are there. Now David and his men went up and did raids against the Jerusites, the Grizzites, and the Amalekites. For these were the land settlements from Telem on the way to Shur and on the land of Egypt. Each of these three are enemies of Israel, especially the Amalekites. We've already seen them before. They are duly hated by the Israelites. David struck the land, leaving neither man nor woman alive, but took away the sheep, the oxen, the donkeys, the camels, and the clothing, and came back to Ashan. So David goes and utterly wipes out every human being in these settlements. So these would have been small little towns and villages. And he takes all the cattle, all the sheep, and all the goods. Now already we've seen David has been kind of restrained. Here he's not restrained. And the question becomes, why does he do this? One is Israel's enemies. Two, he's got to keep up with deception. The deception is he's going to tell the king the people he's been raiding are not these people. So listen to what he says. When Ashan asked, "Against whom have you made a raid today?" And David would say, "Against the Negab of Judah," or against the Negab of the Jermelites, or against the Negab of the Kenites. David left neither man nor woman alive to be brought back to Gath, thinking they might tell about us and say, "David has done so and so." Such was his practice all the time he lived in the country of the Philistines. For this year and a half, he's been telling the king of Gath that he's been fighting against his enemies, which are his people. In reality, he's been fighting against essentially Israel's enemies and bringing their booty back to the king. And the king accepts it, doesn't question him. So David is being duplicitous with the king as he is for a year and a half staying away from Saul. So it's living with the enemy, getting favor from the enemy because you trick the enemy into thinking that you're doing them a favor, and when in reality you're doing Israel a favor. Now this seems to be working really well for David. King doesn't seem, he trusts. What is interesting is the king, the enemy's king, who David essentially is going against, trusts him, loves him, wants him to be close to him, as we'll read. Where the king that David served faithfully and honestly rejected him. So it's interesting some of the comparisons that we have with these. David also plays in many ways in this story a trickster. David is cunning. He is smart. He is brave. He is bold. He takes risk. Very things Saul will not do. So the character of David, if you're reading this story and you're an Israelite and you know of these enemies, you're laughing at the humor of the story, you're cheering him on. You know, if we were to read this story, it would be like, during the Revolutionary War, somebody helping Great Britain but going against them at the same time. Asher trusted David, thinking, "He has made himself utterly abhorrent to the people of Israel. Therefore he shall always be my servant." He thinks because of what David says he's doing that he'll always remain with him because they'll hate him. In those days, the Philistines gathered their forces for war to fight against Israel. And Asher said to David, "You know, of course, that you and your men are to go out with me in the army." So this time period ends, and now there's this period where all of the Philistine kings are going to gather together and go fight against Israel. And he looks at David and says, "You're coming." And you got to think, David's probably like, "Oh no, how am I going to get out of this?" David said to Ash, "Very well then, you shall know that what you do your servant can do." Ash said to David, "Very well, I will make you my bodyguard for life." So you're going to stay close to me. 2 reasons. One, I want all the other Philistines to know that David, the mighty Philistine and Goliath killer, is on our side, and he's my bodyguard. And 2, when we go fight, I want the enemy to see that you're beside me. Because what kind of trophy would that be for the king of Gath to say, "I've got your best soldier on my side now"? So you can just imagine, internally David's going, how am I going to get out of this? How am I going to get out of this? So we get this moment where David's going to have to go fight against Israel, and then there's a break in the story. You know, if we were watching a movie, it would be a cutaway scene to the other characters. What's been happening with Saul? So we break the story and we go to hear what's going on in Israel. Now Samuel had died. The last judge, the first prophet, is gone. And one of the things we've got to remember in the story, remember when David went and ran to the prophets and Saul finds out about it, he goes and what? Kills them all but one. What we'll find out is there's no more prophets in Israel because Samuel has died and all the others have what? And the last remaining ones with David, with the ephod. What Warren was asking about last week. The garment that they wore when they would seek God's guidance. Now Samuel died and all of Israel mourned for him and buried him in Ramah, his own city. So we get the introduction that Samuel is dead, and then we also get an introduction to some of the legislation and enforcement that Saul has made during his kingship, which is Saul had expelled the mediums and wizards from the land. So if you go back to Deuteronomy and Leviticus and other parts of the covenant, you find out that there is only a couple of ways that you are allowed to seek God's guidance. And that is through Urim and Thummim, which we've already talked about, the casting of lots, through the prophets, and through dreams and visions. Outside of that, you are not to try to find out God's will or purposes any other way. Now, just like today, there are people that say that they can tell you your future, and there are people that say that they can speak to spirits or ghosts. The same was in the ancient world, even more so, especially in other faiths outside of Israel. There were always those that could commune with the spirits, that could commune with ancestors, to tell you what you wanted to know about. So Saul, the king, has said that is not acceptable. It is against the law. If you're caught doing it, you're going to be heavily punished. The Philistines assembled and came and encamped in Shunem. Saul gathered all of Israel and encamped in Gilboa. And when Saul the army of the Philistines, he was afraid, and his heart trembled greatly. He has no courage. When Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him, not by dreams, not by Urim, and it could have been Urim and Thummim, but just Urim, or by the prophets. The 3 acceptable ways, he can't find any word from God. Then Saul said to his servant, "Seek out for me a woman who is a medium." What does your translation say? Medium. Witch. That could be another translation. "Find for me a medium or witch, so that I may go to her and inquire of her." Now listen, the king has made the pronouncement. Now the king is asking for it. This shows you Saul's character. He is desperate to the point that he's willing to go against his own rules and regulations. He's desperate to find out what he needs to do. He feels paralyzed. Where we look at David, and David, in a minute we're going to hear David's prayer to God. God is close to David. God is far away from Saul, yet Saul still struggles doing the right thing. His servant said to him, there is a medium or a witch at Endor. That just sounds cool. I don't know why it does. But like if you were going to tell this story, there's a witch in Endor. That just sounds like the beginning of a cool story. And it is a cool story. One of the things about this story, it depends on who reads it and who preaches it, you've heard. Saul is the king of Israel, the anointed one. In the story, the witch or the medium of Endor has more character and is viewed as more favorable in the story than the actual king of Israel. You know, that tells you something about how low Saul has gotten. That the one that is outlawed and who goes against the commands of Israel's God has more character than the king. So let's read our story. I think we've all come to this story at some point. It's a neat story. You could imagine every time the story was retold, you know, people always enjoyed getting to this part of the story. I don't know why it is for me, but I like it. Saul disguised himself. He puts on a disguise. He put on other clothes and went there with two with him. And they came to the woman by night. A king disguises himself and travels by night because he knows he's doing something wrong. And came to the woman by night, and he said, consult a spirit for me and bring up for me the one whom I named to you. The woman said, surely you know that what Saul has done, how he has cut off the mediums and the wizards from the land. Why then are you laying a snare for me to bring about my death? The woman shows character. She knows what the law is. Why are you trying to get me to do something that I should not be doing? Are you trying to get me in trouble? But Saul swore to her by the Lord, as the Lord lives, no punishment shall come upon you for this thing. Then the woman said, whom shall I bring up for you? And he answered, bring up Samuel for me. Samuel has already told Saul what? You're not the one. That should have been the end of it. I mean, this complicated relationship between Saul and Samuel is one that over and over again, Samuel has told Saul, not only you're not the one, it's not even going to be your children that are going to be the one, you just need to let it go. He's so desperate, he calls up the one who has already told him what he needs to know. Because what he needs to know has already been the word from God. He calls up Samuel. He said, call up Samuel. When the woman saw Samuel, she cried out with a loud voice. And the woman said to Saul, why have you deceived me? You are Saul. She recognizes who he is when Samuel shows up. The king said to her, have no fear. What do you see? And the woman said to Saul, I see what does your translation say?
Ghostly figure.
Ghostly figure. A spirit, a divine being.
Saul gods.
Huh?
Saul gods.
Saul gods. So it's a spirit, it's a ghost, it's something that is not normal. We imagine it's dark, it's at night, there's candlelight, lamplight, and she sees an apparition of Samuel. And all of a sudden she realizes that she's been duped by the king to bring up this prophet of God who, let's just be honest, would have been her enemy. Because Samuel was the one going around making sure people weren't doing the things they weren't supposed to be doing. He was a judge as much as a prophet. The woman said to Saul, I have seen the ghost, the apparition, the divine being coming up out of the ground, he said to her, "What is his appearance?" And she said, "An old man is coming up. He is wrapped in a robe." So Saul knew that it was Samuel. And he bowed with his face to the ground and did obeisance. He essentially humbles himself, but almost in a sense of worship. It's a little confusing on exactly what he's doing, but it's not appropriate. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Why have you disturbed me by bringing me up?" And Saul answered, "I am in great distress, for the Philistines are warring against me. And God has turned away from me and answers me no more, either by prophets or by dreams. So I have summoned you to tell me what I should do." He's so paralyzed in indecision, he doesn't know what to do. So he calls up Samuel from the dead. And Samuel said, "Why then do you ask me, since the Lord has turned from you and become your enemy? The Lord has done to you just as he spoke by me, for the Lord has torn the kingdom out of your hand and given it to your neighbor David, because you did not obey the voice of the Lord and did not carry out his fierce wrath against Amalek. Therefore the Lord has done this thing to you today. Moreover, the Lord will give Israel along with you into the hands of the Philistines, and tomorrow you and your son shall be with me. And the Lord will also give the army of Israel into the hands of the Philistines." Every time I read this passage, I always think of Ebenezer Scrooge when he's got the ghost right there telling him his future. And in Dickens' story, he can change his future. Saul is stuck. He knows at this point there is nothing he can do to save himself and to save his sons. His fate is written. And by the next day, he's going to be wherever Samuel is. Immediately Saul fell full length on the ground, filled with beer because of the words of Samuel, and there was no strength in him, for he had eaten nothing all day and all night. If we've got to see a picture of the end of somebody's journey and how bad it can get, Saul, who had potential but wasn't willing to use courage and obedience to follow God, is now so depleted. In many ways, he's already a ghost. The woman came to Saul, and when she saw that he was terrified, she said to him, "Your servant has listened to you. I have taken my life in my hand and have listened to what you have said to me. Now therefore you listen to your servant. Let me set a morsel of bread before you. Eat, that you may have strength when you go your way." So this witch, this medium of Endor, who is an outlaw in many ways, who's been duped by the king, looks at him and in some ways has compassion on him, and does for him what he can't even do for himself: feed him. He refused. "I will not eat." But his servants together with the woman urged him, and he listened to their words. So he got up from the ground and sat on the bed. Now the woman had a fatted calf in the house. She quickly slaughtered it. She took flour, kneaded it, and baked unleavened bread. She put them before Saul and his servants, and they ate, and then they rose and went away that night. As we compare and contrast Saul and David, we also know that Saul's ending is coming. And the ending with Saul, in many ways, will be the ending of Israel's history up until this point. It's the end of the judges. It's the end of the prophet with Samuel. It's the end of this kind of king. And something new is about to inbreak in Israel's history with David. But as the end comes, it doesn't come with a bang. It comes with a whimper. He is frail. He is defeated before he ever goes into battle. I mean, can you imagine following him into battle? What chance do you have? This is your king who the night before battle has gone to a medium, who collapses on the ground because he's not eaten. There is no victory here. And part of it is, yes, God has removed God's hand, but it has driven Saul to, he has made his own bed in many ways. We flip over back to the Philistines. The question is, what is David going to do? David's in this kind of predicament. He's made his bed with the Philistines. He's been duplicitous with them. But now they're going off to war. Will he fight with them? How's he going to get out of it? There's tension building in the narrative. You know, as an audience, we get to hear this story and we get to jump into it. You know, it's not just written as history, it's written as narrative. Because we want to be invited into the story to hear it, to become a part of it. We want to ask, even if we've heard it before, just like every good movie or good novel, the writers of 1st and 2nd Samuel want us to come into the story. How is he going to get out of this predicament? Now the Philistines gathered all their forces at Aphek while Israelites were encamped by the fountain that is of Jezreel. As the lords of the Philistines were passing on by hundreds and by thousands, and David and his men were passing on the rear with Achish, the commanders of the Philistines says, "What are these Hebrews doing here?" I mean, they kind of stand out. And Achish said to the commanders of the Philistines, "Is this not David, the servant of King Saul of Israel, who has been with me now for days and years? Since he has deserted to me, I have found no fault in him to this day." We know as the audience that he's got a lot of faults, at least against this king. But he brags on him. "This is my boy. He served me well. Nothing bad you can say about him." But the commanders of the Philistines were angry with him, and the commanders of the Philistines said, "Send the man back so that he may return to the place that you have assigned to him. He shall not go down with us to battle, or else he may become an adversary to us in the battle." You can almost see David internally go, "Yes." Yes. Outward, he's probably like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I get to go back to Ziklag, wherever it is that, you know, he's become commander of. I get to go back to where my family is while the battle's taking place." For how could this fellow reconcile himself to this Lord? Would it not be the heads of the men here? Is this not David whom they sing to the one another in dances? Saul has killed his thousands and David his 10,000s. Remember when we heard them singing after they come back to battle, and that really ticks Saul off. His reputation is that he kills Philistines. Don't you think during this battle he might just decide he'd rather kill us than his own people? Send him home. Then Achish called David and said to him, now you can imagine this king is trying to be polite to David about this thing that he thinks David wants to be with him, but he's going to have to send him back, and he's trying to be overly polite to him because he really does care about him. Unlike Saul, this Philistine king sees David and loves him. As the Lord lives, you have been honest. We know that's not true, but to him it is. And to me it seems right that you should march out and be with me in the campaign. For I have found nothing wrong in you from the day you're coming to me until now. Nevertheless, the Lords do not approve of you, so go back now and go peaceably. David, don't make a scene. Please don't make a scene. It'd be hard on me and be hard on you. Be peaceful. Do nothing to displease the Lords. Don't mouth at them. Don't fight against them. Just graciously just walk away. You can probably see David acting out, you know. But David said, but what have I done? What have you found in your servant? From this day I entreated your servants until now that I should not go fight against the enemies of my Lord the king. Oh, he's putting on a show. And Asher replied to David, I know that you are blameless in my sight as an angel of God. He's putting on too. Look at this. Nevertheless, the commanders of the Philistines have said, he shall not go up with us to the battle. Now then, rise early in the morning, you and the servants of your Lord who came with you, and go to the place that I appointed you. As for the evil report, do not take it to heart, for you have done well before me. The Philistines know better than this king of Gath. They see in David a snake. This guy sees a dove, an angel of God. Start early in the morning and leave as soon as you have light. So David set out with his men early in the morning, and they returned to the land of the Philistines, but the Philistines went up to Jezreel. So as the Philistines go and march to go against Judah and Israel, David goes back to where he's been for a year and a half. Now when David and his men came to Ziklag on the third day, so it took 3 days to get there. Now we got to think to ourselves. There are people that David has ticked off over the last year and a half. And they get word that David, and not only David, but all the Philistines that he's been serving are going up to the battle line. He's made what? His land vulnerable. They've come out for retribution. The Amalekites had made a raid on the Negeb and on Ziklag, and had attacked Ziklag, burned it down, and unlike David, they take people captives. David had been going around just killing everybody. They take captives. The women and all who were in it, both small and great. They killed none of them, but carried them off and went their way. And when David and his men came to the city, they found it burned down, their wives and sons and daughters taken captive. Then David and the people who were with them raised their voices and wept until there was no more strength to weep. And David's 2 wives had also been taken, Abinoam of Jezreel and Abigail the widow of Nabal of Carmel. And David was great in danger, for the people spoke of stoning him. Imagine you come back, your 600 men, come back and their wives and their children and their stuff is gone because you went out to go play with the kings of the Philistines. They're ready to, they got to blame somebody, they're going to blame David. For the people spoke of stoning him because all the people were bitter in spirits for their sons and daughters. But David strengthened himself in the Lord his God. Unlike Saul, who does what? Who has no courage, who has no strength, who really doesn't rely on God, but uses God more as a means of knowing what to do. David puts his trust in God. David said to the priest, Abithar, son of Amalek, the one who came with the ephod after Saul has killed all the other prophets, bring the ephod. David inquired of the Lord, shall I pursue this band? Shall I overtake them? Unlike Saul, David hears back from God, pursue, for you shall surely overtake and surely rescue. So David set out, he and the 600 men who were with him. And they came to the Wadi Besor, where those stayed who were left behind. But David went on with the pursuit, he and 400 men. 200 stayed behind, too exhausted to cross the wadi. So of 600 men, 2 stay behind and essentially watch the backs. That's important because we come back to that 200 later. So he goes from 600 to 400 men are in pursuit of these Amalekites who have raided and taken their women, their children, and their stuff. You know, if we were to imagine this as a Western, You know, you've got a raiding party, and now the cowboys got their posse and they're on pursuit. In the open country, they found an Egyptian and brought him to David. So out in the middle of nowhere, there's this Egyptian that's just there. They gave him bread and he ate. They gave him water to drink. They also gave him a piece of fig cake with 2 clusters of raisins. Notice how they care for him. They just gave him water and food. They gave him a fig cake. When he had eaten, his spirit revived, for he had not eaten bread or drunk water for 3 days and 3 nights. Then David said to him, "To whom do you belong? Where are you from?" He said, "I am a young man of Egypt, servant to an Amalekite. My master left me behind because I fell sick 3 days ago. We had a raid on the Negeb of the Cherethites, and on which belongs to Judah of the Negeb of Caleb, and we burned Ziklag down." And David said to him, "Will you take me down to the raiding party?" And he said, "Swear to me by God that you will not kill me or hand me over to my master, and I will take you down." Listen, if you promise you will not kill me or give me back to the person who left me to die. When he had taken him down, they were spread all over the ground, eating and drinking and dancing, because great among their spoil they had taken from the land of the Philistines, from them to Judah. So they spy the camp down there, and the people down there are in revelry. They are celebrating their great victory. They still think what? David's with the Philistines on the front lines. They never thought he would come back and pursue them. So they're down there what? Celebrating, dancing, getting drunk, having a good time. David attacked them from twilight until evening the next day. Not one of them escaped. I loved how they say that. Not one of them escaped, except 400 young men who mounted camels and fled. Right. There were a lucky few. That was a lot of people, though, if only 400 fled. David recovered all that the Amalekites had taken. David rescued his 2 wives. Nothing was missing, whether small or great, sons or daughters, spoil or anything that had taken. David brought back everything. David captured all the flocks and herds which were driven ahead of the other cattle. People said, "This is David's spoil." One thing to notice is, unlike Saul, David is able to what? Keep his people safe, even in a very vulnerable situation. The second thing that we'll notice is David is a different kind of king. Remember, where does David come from? He comes from a poor family. David is not the top son or the second son or the third son. He's the 8th son. He knows what it is to be the small man, the one left behind. David came to the 200 men who had been too exhausted to follow. These weren't the strongest of the soldiers, but they followed David as much as they could. They went out to meet David and to meet the people who were with him. When David drew near to the people, he saluted them. Then all the corrupt and worthless fellows among the men who had gone with David said, "Because they did not go with us, we will not give them any of the spoil that we have recovered, except that each man take his wife and his children and leave." These worthless fellows didn't do nothing. Everything we got back is ours now, and whatever we got back more is even more ours. They can have their families, but they can't have anything else. We did the work. But David said, "You shall not do so, my brothers, with what the Lord has given us. He has preserved us and handed us over to the raiding party that attacked us. Who would listen to you in this matter? For the share of the one who goes down into battle shall be the same as the share of the one who stays by the baggage. They shall share alike." The writer looks at his audience, because this is long ago when he's The story of David, the audience of 1st and 2nd Samuel is telling an ancient story to Israelites and reminds them from that day forward, he made it a statue, an ordinance of Israel. It continues to this present day, the audience's day, the original audience of Samuel. And no matter if you are in the battle or if you're the one on the rear guard, your salary, you're going to be paid the same. What kind of king is David? David sounds a little bit like Jesus. Remember the parable Jesus has of those that are out working? They begin the early in the day, and then some more come later in the day, and then some come just right before the end of the day. And they all start getting paid the same, and the people who've been working all day start to complain. And the reminder is, no matter who worked here, it's not your land. It's not I'm going to pay equally, and you've all got enough. The kingdom that David's going to at least begin with and promise is a kingdom that's going to be different than Saul's. Because in Saul's kingdom, you had a lot of people that worked hard, but just like when David came along, they left because they were irritated. A lot of the landowners, the holders of land, were making lots of wealth, but the people that worked it weren't. And they looked at David as an alternative way of leading. Yet when they're with David, they begin to become just like Saul, and he says, no, we're not going to live that kind of life together. Everyone deserves an equal share. That might sound a little harsh today. For some. When David came to Ziklag, he sent part of the spoil to his friends, to the elders of Judah. He even gives those that are back in Judah some of the spoils of the war. He doesn't keep it all for himself. He shares because he knows it all came from God. Here is a present for you from the spoils of the enemies of the Lord. It is with those in Bethel and Ramathan and Negev and Jethor, so on and so on, where David and his men had roamed. Now, part of that is out of the goodness of his heart, but part of it is a little bit political. I might be living in the Philistines' territory, but my heart's still with you. And I got all of this from your enemies. We'll end the day with the death of Saul. As we read this story, the one thing we can say of Saul at the end is it takes almost the last moment of his life to show some courage. And he does show courage. Now the Philistines fought against the Israel, and the men of Israel fled before the Philistines, and many fell on Mount Gilgal. And the Philistines overtook Saul and his sons, and the Philistines killed Jonathan and Abner and Melchizedek, the sons of Saul. And the battle pressed hard upon Saul, and the archers found him, and he was badly wounded by them. Then Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through it with it, so the uncircumcised may not come and thrust me through and make sport of me." He knows he's going to die. He does not need Israel to be humiliated at his death. He's already, at some point, known that he has caused Israel enough pain by this point. In the ancient world, if you were to capture or to kill a king's enemy, an enemy or king, you would make sport of it. We've already read when the Philistines at the beginning of 1 Samuel stole the ark. What did they do? They put it in their temple. We read that when David kills Goliath, they take Goliath's sword and put it with what? The altar. And so a sign of saying our God is stronger than your God. There's no telling what's going to happen if Saul is alive at the end of this battle. So he says to his armor bearer, just kill me. But the armor bearer was unwilling, for he was terrified. David still isn't the anointed one. Saul is still the anointed one, even though he's not David. David wouldn't kill him because he's still the anointed one. When the armor bearer saw that, so Saul took his own sword and fell upon it. This isn't suicide in the conventional sense. This is, I'm going to take my own life so that it's not taken by an enemy. Or that I'm not humiliated and that my people aren't humiliated by me being killed in front of the enemy. When the armor bearer saw that Saul was dead, he fell upon his sword and died with him. There's nowhere else to go. So Saul and his 3 sons and the armor bearer and all the men died together on the same day. So we can imagine the Philistines, after the battle, there are all of these Israelites dead on the battlefield. And what do you do after the war? You go and you start to pick apart what's left. You start to take armor. You start to take swords. Part of it is because, guess what? This is part of your commission. Whatever you take is yours. We know from World War II, people on battlefields took back all sorts of things. Grandfathers and stuff. If you've known people, they had stuff from war. Back then they did the same thing. Well, the men of Israel who were on the other side of the valley and those beyond the Jordan saw that the men of Israel had fled, that Saul and his sons were dead. They forsook their towns and fled, and the Philistines came and occupied them. Not only have they lost the battle, but all the villages around the battle, the people flee. They don't even make a fight for their homes. And the Philistines occupied. The next day, when the Philistines came to strip the dead, they found Saul and his 3 sons fallen on Mount Gilboa. They can identify them by their armor. They cut off his head, stripped off his armor, and sent messengers throughout the land of the Philistines to carry the good news to the houses of their idols and to their people. Their enemy's gone. They put his armor in the temple of Ashtoreth. They fashioned his body to the wall of Bethshan. They've humiliated him even in death. At least he didn't have to do it in life. So they cut off his head, they take his armor, they put it in a temple as a way of saying, look, our gods are stronger than your gods. And they've taken what's left of his body and hung it up on a wall. But when the inhabitants of Jabesh Gilead heard what the Philistines had done to Saul, all the valiant men sent out. Now, if you go back and read the story, this was one of the villages that Saul rescued from the Philistines. They remember. They remember when Saul was a good king. They remember how he protected them and saved them. And men from that village, strong, courageous men, go and traveled all night long, and they took the body of Saul and the bodies of his sons from the wall. They came to Jabesh and buried them there. And they took their bones and buried them under the Tarshmax tree in Jabesh and fasted 7 days. It is not Israel who mourns. They don't have time to mourn. They're in fleeing. Their king is dead. The king's sons are dead. They've been defeated. And the question becomes, what will happen now? And that's where we'll pick up next week. Let me close this in a word of prayer. And I'm hoping to get y'all out. It looks like it might be raining. I can't tell. Yeah. Let's pray. Gracious God, we just thank you again for the day. We thank you for the rain. God, we thank you for the stories that come to us generations and generations upon thousands of years ago. that we still pick up, we still read, and we still see your story playing out not only in the lives of those of ancient Israel, but even today. Lord, we pray that we, like David, can have courage to do the right thing, to seek you. God, we pray for those in leadership. And Lord, we pray that we as a community of faith can continue to lean on you in all things. And help us as we navigate the world not to look for resources outside your will. Help us to do all that you've called us to do and bring us back together. In Christ's name we pray. Amen.